Good morning, everyone. Just give it a few minutes here for people to sign in, and we will get started with a quick overview of the Zoom meeting features, and then I'll turn it over to Tim Taylor to introduce and kick off today's webinar. Okay, for anyone who's new, thank you for joining us today. My name is Edgar Strawbridge. I'm at Frontier Energy. I'm just going to walk us through the Zoom meeting features for the Zoom webinar. Your video camera will not be needed. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter those questions into the Q&A function. We will answer questions at the end, but also during the forum or during the webinar. And please use the chat feature if you wish to interact with panelists or other participants at any time. And sort of separate of the questions, if you have any comments or feedback you'd like to provide, we are recording the webinar and we'll be providing the recording and presentation slides after the event. And just a quick overview of the Zoom meeting controls that should appear at the bottom of your screen. The chat feature can be found in the lower left-hand corner, and then the Q&A on the lower right-hand corner. With that, I will turn it over to Tim Taylor to kick us off.
Well, thank you very much, Edgar. Appreciate that. And I'm going to put my screen up and say thank you all very much for joining us. We have what I hope will be a very interesting, what I know will be a very interesting webinar today on behalf of the Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition, but also on behalf of the Long Beach and East Bay Clean Cities. We are producing this series of Tech and Spec webinars. Again, Edgar mentioned, but I want to say again, this webinar will be recorded and it will be available in a few days on this website, the cleancitiessacramento.org. The link to it will be here, and the presentation link will be here. The actual webinar will be on our Clean Cities YouTube channel. And with that, I would like to say our speaker today is Sadil Trabowski, who's the CEO at Open Grants. They're a company that provides a lot of information, has a huge wealth of information, which you will see when we get to the presentation on grants and incentives. And I'd like to say thank you very much to all of our sponsors. Without their help, we wouldn't be able to have our webinar series or even have our Clean Cities Coalition. So we're very appreciative of our sponsors. And I'll get to this at the end, but I just wanted to say we do have a series of presentations, and we will begin posting presentations that are going to continue on into 2021. But with that, I would like to say thank you once again for being with us. And now I'm going to toss it over to Sadil to begin his presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Thanks, Edgar, and all for choosing to take time out of your day. I am excited to talk a bit about grant funding today. I'll just give some quick background on myself, and then I'll dive right in. So first and foremost, and Edgar, if you want to throw those polls out there, I'd love to just get a feeling in the room for what people are looking for, what your experience is currently with the grant space. If you wanted to just kind of respond to those polls while I give some background. So myself, I spent several years, and some of you may know me from my time at a company called Carbon Blue, helping diversify and integrate alternative fuels and advanced vehicle technology into fleets across the state of California and in other places. And then spent quite a bit of time at a company called Momentum, formerly known as Grant Farm, where I supported consulting teams helping other folks secure grant funding for vehicle fleets and deployment of alternative fuels and advanced vehicle technologies, and working on modernization and electrification and all those great things. And so I gained a deep appreciation for just how much work and how, how involved some of this stuff can be. And one of the really, things that came up for me while we were doing that was just how what a burden is placed on, people looking for these funding opportunities, so that, already you're trying to maybe run a fleet, already you're trying to be innovative and do what you can to make things better for people. And on top of all that, the government comes along and, it's not really their fault, right? They're very well intentioned and there's a lot of great programs, and I'll talk to that in a bit. But one of the things that we realized is that a lot of bureaucrats didn't quite have the tools they needed to efficiently accomplish what they were trying to accomplish. And so that's why we built Open Grants. So this isn't going to be a pitch about Open Grants, but I just wanted to give that frame of reference that, I'm the CEO at a company called Open Grants, and our mission is to democratize public funding and ensure that it is equitable, accessible, transparent, and straightforward in terms of transacting those engagements. So without further ado, I'm just going to dive into, and I love the results here. So it seems like most people are looking for grants. More than half of you aren't using anything at all to kind of formally look for grants. And then there's a smattering of sort of folks using grants.gov and grants.ca.gov and some kind of third-party tool. And more than half of you are looking at hiring a grant writer potentially. Very few of you are lucky enough to have one. And some folks seem to just be not on that path at all. But I really do appreciate you sharing that information. That'll really help me as I kind of continue with this presentation. And it's also, I just want to throw out there, I'm happy to answer questions as I run through these slides. I really do would love to just answer your questions and engage in that way. So definitely feel free to interrupt with the Q&A panel. You can drop questions in there. But so the beginning of this presentation is all about just what grants are. And while it may seem like a simple concept, I want to talk through a few points. It sounds like most of you know what grants are because you're looking for them. And so I'm not going to go into any depth into, the vehicle itself and what that entails. But I do want to talk through a few points that I think are really important to consider. One is grants are a really great tool to demonstrate technology within your fleet. They're a great vehicle where you don't have to extend too much risk typically, especially financial and capital risk, and you can demonstrate within your fleet how a certain technology might perform. So whether that's electric vehicles or some kind of natural gas or just a new sort of right-sized vehicle within your fleet. Those are all things that grant funding can support. Everything from fleet right-sizing to electrification to everything in between. And grants are a tool for that because you don't have to pay them back, and because they are they're non-dilutive. They're also an exceptional opportunity to partner. And I'm going to talk more about this later on, but grants are a partnership. They are a relationship between you and some kind of entity, whether that be a public agency typically, or sometimes a foundation. And they're a relationship that can be nurtured and developed into something great. So something to be aware of is that these folks who are giving out grants, they're frequently looking for good partners. They want people who are progressive and are going to go after things. They want to look good, right? They're fairly divorced from the money itself. They want to make sure that the money they are deploying, meets their objectives, and it makes them look like the hero, frankly. And it's a great opportunity. Grants are a partnership. Grants are non-dilutive. You don't have to pay them back. They're not, taking part of your organization. And grants are also an opportunity to sell a concept to an organization. So if you're working on some kind of innovative integration of things, grants are a great way to get that initial validation saying, hey, electric vehicles do work, and here's some people who want to back it. Or, hey, right sizing this fleet will work, and here's some ways that people want to back it. So that's my my spiel on what are grants. Of course, fleets can use grants, and I'm going to get into a lot of that in a minute. But just throwing that out there, some people think that grants aren't available for fleets, or they think that there's not enough grant funding. But we've worked on projects that are as small as 100 grand and as big as 20 or 90 million dollars. I think is the biggest one that I've had the pleasure of touching. And so there's tons of opportunity, and especially recognizing that fleet is expensive, that there are a lot of just infrastructure and hardware costs involved and hard costs involved with a fleet. Tons of great opportunity, and that's one of the things that the government's great at is they have deep pockets and they're able to spend money ways that other people can't. So I do want to cover a case study real quickly, and the reason I want to talk about this is that I think sometimes you want to try thinking creatively a bit about how you can leverage this kind of capital. So the case study in point here is that there's a clean tech startup. They were focused on diversifying fuel, and they were able to leverage $350,000 to do this. Now, while the grant itself was not specifically about building their company or putting a vehicle on the ground, it was about studying and researching and planning. And so I don't want to discount the value of not only funding vehicle replacement and right sizing and modernization of fleet, but there's also a lot of value, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but I do want to bring it up. There's a lot of value in getting deep and strategizing and planning around what you're doing. And one of the big things that comes up frequently is, you'll see a great grant opportunity, but it's due in 2 weeks, and you just don't have time to put together a good solicitation. And so something to think about is, what would it take for you to put together a year-long plan of, hey, these are the grant opportunities we're going to apply for, and here's the resources we need to apply for them, and this is how we're going to execute on it to make sure we're successful. That's the optimal. You want to come into these relationships, into these opportunities in a very active way instead of trying to be reactive, and you'll put together much more compelling proposals. So that's something to note. So where to find grants? Lots of interesting places to find grants. Grants.gov is a really popular one. The SBA website has a pretty good repository of grants. Grants.ca.gov is a new platform that just got launched here in California. If you don't know about it, you should check it out. Myself and the team at Open Grants, we were lucky enough to collaborate with the Department of Research and the library in helping move that effort forward, and it's great. It's really nice to finally have all of the California grants all in one spot. So highly recommend that as a resource. And then finally, of course, you can check out Open Grants. There's a lot of other third-party tools out there as well that do a good job of aggregating grant funding. And I'm happy to answer more questions about why we think Open Grants is the best, but I'm just going to blaze ahead at this point because the really interesting stuff is coming up. So just a visual representation here of some of the places you can find grants. Be sure to do that. How do you win grants? So this is probably one of the things that comes up a lot. At the past company that I was lucky enough to study and work with this team at a company called Momentum, which I mentioned earlier, and they have and they continue to have an incredible amount of talent and success writing grants in this space in particular. And there's a lot of different reasons that anyone can be as successful as they are with grant writing, but it really boils down to a few specific points. And the first one is just to follow the rules. Like, you'd be amazed, and maybe you wouldn't be, but you'd be amazed at how often people submit grants that just get disqualified right away. And when that happens, it's because they didn't follow the rules, right? They didn't include the right cover sheet, or they didn't make the font the right size, or they submitted something with too many pages, or what have you. They forgot to put in their budget. A lot of these lack of following the rules disqualifications someone may have put in, 2, 3 weeks or months of work, and to just get disqualified because you didn't read the RFP closely, it's a huge bummer, real disappointing, real blow to morale. So you don't want to do that. You want to follow the rules. And it does sound, it sounds so simple, and people mess it up so frequently, that I thought it deserved some extra attention here. So you want to be, when you get that RFP and you're like, this is the grant for us, and you've read through it once and you say, okay, this is definitely the grant for us, read through it again, give it another look and make sure, what we do is we make a list of all of the things we need to do in order to be, in order to follow the rules. It's very clear, it's written down. And what happens frequently is, you're maybe like 60 or 100 pages into an RFP, and you literally just get tired of reading it. They're not delivered in the best, most user-friendly format. So following the rules, huge benefit. That will put you ahead of a lot of people who simply don't follow the rules. And then the second part of this is to be a good partner. I saw that, Gina just put this out there as well, build a rapport with potential partners ahead of time. Super helpful. You could think of grants like a sale almost, right? You don't want to just cold call people. You want to come into the relationship with the opportunity, knowing that they know that you are, someone of integrity, an organization that's going to do well with their money, an organization that, believes in what they're doing and is working to accomplish some similar goals that they have. So you want to build rapport up front, ahead of time. You want to certainly continue to nurture that relationship. And then when you're a grant recipient, definitely lean into that relationship. They are going to be there to help you when things go bad, which they may, right? Projects get all askew all the time. The world is not a perfect place, and entropy is the law, of course. And so you want to have a really good relationship with those folks, both on the onset, so that they can, they'll be sure to give you a good look and give you a good chance to be included and funded. But on the back end of like receiving a grant, you also want to be a great partner, because what it'll do is open up pathways for you to move forward and get more grant funding. If you are, as Gina mentioned here, if you're transparent in your communication, you're not trying to like, if bad things happen, just tell them. That's something that I learned kind of early on in my life. Was lucky to learn, just like, just fess up. If when something goes bad, just like tell people about it, work on it, and fix it. There's no like, there's not a useful, there's no good use case for just hiding when things go awry. It's always helpful to reach out to your allies and other folks who have the same ideas and ideals in mind, and keep things moving ahead, and keep everyone on the same even keel.
So Dale, I had a question for you real quick relative to these partnerships. Do you have some examples of some partnerships that have been really good and maybe some that have been really bad?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, a partnership that, has been exceptional for me personally is we worked with the Energy Commission on a project called the Center for Alternative Fuels. And it was amazing. They helped promote us in PR. They were, really helpful. They walked us through a budget amendment. We had to change some things. The project changed directions a few times. There's a lot of sort of opportunity for us to potentially have just been like lost in the bureaucratic maze that is the California Energy Commission. But because we had this really great relationship with our contract managers, and we had this great relationship with the staff at the Energy Commission, we had this ongoing dialogue. And when we needed to change things, we just came to an agreement, sat down, and made those changes, and worked together in a really collaborative way. And so there was a nice outcome there. On the other hand, I won't name names here, but there's been multiple times, unfortunately, where we've seen projects go downhill because something happens. They burn through their budget a bit too quickly, or something turns out to be different than what they thought it would be. They don't produce the thing they were trying to produce for whatever reason. Maybe the science isn't there, or maybe they didn't have the timing right. And they try to hide it. And what happens is eventually those projects get audited. Sometimes there's even, the state, request that their money be given back, that kind of thing. So you just, it's in everyone's best interest to just be upfront and be clear and transparent with one another, because really, and Gina's point here is, amazing. It's, they want to help you be successful, so they look good, right? Like, they already put the money into the thing, like they committed, you're in it, you're in this relationship. And the last thing they want is for it to fail, end up on the wrong side of an audit, and go through a big, legal quagmire. And so, the ideal is that you work together and keep things moving. So I'll see. There's a question here in the QA panel. Well, actually, did that answer your question, Tim? Was that a good?
Yeah, and I see that you saw the question in the well, something about so.
And I love Gina's commentary over here. Yeah, you should always just assume you're getting audited and be prepared. And I'll talk about that in a moment here. There's an attendee asked, is there a single document that lists all available grants as they are offered? And if not, what is the most productive way to be notified when grants are available? So we'll go ahead and answer this. There is not a single, well, there are some pretty good aggregators out there. The only one that I know of that has all of the grant funding in the United States, for example, is Open Grants, which is the database we built. And that's one of the reasons we built it, is we got tired of looking in multiple places for grant funding. And we really built the tool that we designed was actually to support grant writers within our marketplace who kept needing to source grants for their clients and found it really frustrating. And we're like, hey, can you make this work? And we said yes, and now it exists. So I wouldn't say there's a single document that lists all the available grants, but there are good aggregated databases across the board. I'd say, grants.gov has about 99% of the federal funding. The rest of it's over on BetaSam, and then there's some of it on just random federal websites. California's grants portal is in process and will soon have all of the state grants for California that are a certain grant vehicle. So there's a lot of good places to get most of it. Actually, so I'll just caution the California Grant Watch is okay, but we've noticed that they do miss out on a lot of CEC grants from time to time. And so that's been something that we've gotten feedback from our grant writers about. But yeah, there's a ton of good tools out there, but you want to be wary of any that, really have holes in their data if you're looking for like a bunch of stuff. The other thing to think about though, on this note is, and then I'll hop over to this other question. The last thing to think about is you may not really need all of the grants, right? If you're in fleet specifically, you might just be looking for CARB and CEC grants, and maybe you want to know about grants that have to do with alternative fuels, or you want to know about grants that have to do with, right sizing your fleet. So there's different ways to build those relationships and partnerships. There's listservs that the agencies put out, and it does require a little more legwork, but you can usually do a pretty good job of building relationships with the people who would fund you most, and work with them. And then, the other option, of course, is to use a tool like Open Grants, or, and then, this is, if you have a grant writer, maybe that's what your grant writer does as part of their job, is to source those grants, and then they might actually use a tool like Open Grants or something else. So lots of opportunities. As far as we know, in the United States, Open Grants has the most complete data set of grant funding that exists right now. So
great. Steele, we have another question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'll go ahead and answer that too. So does Open Grants list local grants offered through air districts, and would state incentives for ZEV be listed? So Oh, and I will talk about this also. So Open Grants does list local grants. We have federal, state, local, foundation, corporate giving, pretty much all of the grant funding in the United States. But we do not have incentives. And incentives programs like, voucher programs and some of those are not there. One of the great places, and I think it's a terribly underutilized resource, and once again, it does suffer sometimes from being updated, but the Department of Energy's Alternative Fuels Data Center has a ton of good resources. And if you haven't visited it, you should. It's incredible. It's a great place to go find a lot of really like fleet specific information about funding and whatnot. However, it does have some issues in terms of being up to date. But it does have, like, as a baseline of content, it has a great baseline of content there. So that's a good place to look for state incentives. I'm actually working and going to send over to Tim a database of incentives that we've compiled, and we do hope to we do hope to have a basically those ZEV incentives added in the new year. So that's that's where we stand at Open Grants with that, and there's other good places to look it up. So yeah, okay, cool. All right, so great questions. Feel free to continue to ask them. I'm gonna hop to the next slide here and talk a little bit about just the process that we try to instill in our teams and our contractors when they are out there. So I want to see another question here, and thank you, Edgar. Yeah, if you can pass it over to the QA section, that way I can read it. The box is real small for me over here. But yeah, I will. I'll pop over and answer that question shortly here. But let me. I'll just go into this a bit. There's a kind of a 4-part process that we break down in terms of putting together and training our contractors to write really competitive, highly competitive grants. And I think I want to frame this by saying that, grant writing is an art. Statistically speaking, you are 3 times more likely to be successful if you work with a professional grant writer who knows what they're doing. And, just to take that to heart, it's, we live in a world of specialization, right? I don't pretend to know how to change the rotors on my car, and that's fine. And, my mechanic doesn't pretend to know how to write code, and that's all cool. Everyone has their specialty, and, grant writing is certainly an art. And there's a lot of benefit you can get out of just kind of efficiencies, really, out of working with a grant writer. They can help you navigate the system a bit faster. They can help you deal with the really funky submission portals that exist out there. There's a lot of things that they can just really help you avoid, and a lot of pitfalls that they can help you avoid. And so, that's something to note, is that if grant writing isn't like right in your strong suit of tools, maybe hire a grant writer. It may really just end up saving you a lot of frustration and headache. That being said, do your research. That's kind of the first thing, is understand who you're approaching for funding, and really like what their goals are. The bureaucrats who are out there deploying this capital, they have really specific things that they're working on, and they have specific missions that they're trying to complete. And frankly, they can be your best ally. And in fact, they want to give you money. That's not it's not this adversarial relationship where you're like, ooh, I got money from them, even though they did, they want to give you money. So that's something that, is in your favor, but they can't give it to you if you're not doing something that they are supposed to be supporting, right? So this really comes down to, it's hilarious to see, people just respond with something totally off topic, and to see this very like detailed feedback come back from the reviewers where they say, hey, this has nothing to do with the topic. If you want to be, competitive in this space, try talking about actually like what we're working on. Researching and understanding what what the agency is after in terms of funding is really going to just make you way more, much more competitive. And it'll build you allies, right? There's people who will then want to fund you over and over again because they know you get it. They know you're also committed to what they're working on, and they are excited about giving you money because once again, as Gina said earlier, they want to be the heroes, right? Like they want to go back to their bosses and say, hey, we spent $1 million of this grant money on this company, and they did everything that our agency is trying to do. They reduced emissions, or they deployed 100 electric vehicles. It was incredible. Those are the kind of things that they want to see. That might be the kind of thing that they want to see. And if it is, and you're able to do it, then hey, it's a match made in heaven. And that brings me to my next point is, once again, just follow the rules. Can't stress that enough. There's an actual scoring card in the RFP. Follow that. Use that as your guide for writing your grant. If you're going to do this yourself, the biggest disservice you can do is just try to write whatever and send it in. It's just going to waste your time, and it's going to waste the reviewer's time. And the real problem there is that if you do that enough, they're just going to stop looking so hard at your proposals, frankly, because they have to review those things when they come in. And if it's way off topic or just way out there and not formatted correctly, not only does it become hard for them to understand, but it just sort of discredits you. It really starts to taint your brand as someone who can competently, do anything if you can't follow the rules that are written down in a pamphlet. And to be fair, they're confusing, but do follow the rules. So and this next one, it kind of capitalizes on that concept, and that is to be very real. So be honest, of course, don't lie. That happens, it shouldn't. So be a good person, don't lie. Use clear, concise language when you're describing what you're working on. Understand that the people who are looking to give you money, they may not be subject matter experts. They might just be people who got promoted into that team, and maybe they've never heard of electric vehicles before and don't know what EVSE is, right? So, be clear. Don't try to come off as this brilliant person by using long, complicated language. Be clear and concise, short words, make it make sense to a lay person. And then the final note here is just to be a partner. So work with your granting partner, not just after you receive the grant, but before. As Gina mentioned and other people have mentioned, you want to start that relationship early on. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the presentation, is if you have time, go and build yourself, within your CRM or whatever kind of tools you use, build yourself a plan. It can be integrated within the rest of your sort of, development plan for your fleet, but build yourself a plan so that we're going to use DERA money, we're going to use HVIP, we're going to use, EVIP, we're going to use these programs to push forward these initiatives. And in order to do that, we need to start the paperwork for HVIP now. We need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to prepare for this. We need to keep a close eye on what the budget is going to be and how fast it gets used up for those voucher programs. There's so many things to consider, and it's not overly complicated, but if you're coming at it from behind the curve and you're not paying attention, it really does it quickly becomes overwhelming, and you'll just give up. And that's a real problem. And people complain about it all the time. They're like, this is so hard. It's so complex. It's blah, blah, blah. It's this and that. Frankly, it's not overly difficult. It's just not as straightforward as, going and getting a loan. And it does require some strategic thought. And when you don't have the time to put in, that's when it becomes this stressful, negative, situation. But if you're able to come at it from a very active and mindful state of, being, then it's a great process. And I mean, maybe not great, but it's not as terrible as people make it out to be. So
Sadale, I had a quick question. You've talked a lot about the amount of work that an entity would need to do. Maybe they would hire a grant writer, but still there's work that comes in-house relative to once you get the money. Are you going to talk a little bit about sort of what the administrative load might look like. And I think sometimes you can put that into a grant and get reimbursed for it, and sometimes you can't. Maybe you could go over some of that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. So I'll do two things real quickly. I will say one is that, getting a grant isn't just, you're not just getting money and then running off to go parade around with your money. It's a relationship, it's a contract. And so it kind of goes back to that, a grant is a sale. It's something that you have to complete and do, and it comes with strings. And depending on the agency and who you're working with and what you're working on, those strings can be fairly onerous, or they can be pretty lightweight. And maybe it only takes, an email a month, and you do some light reporting and then you're done. But there are some grants that require, heavy monthly reporting, reports that can span into, 5 to 10 page little essays that you have to send off every month, along with your invoice, which can, for some agencies, can be quite lengthy. And all of that, that keeps the money flowing and keeps that project moving along and progressing. And so depending on the agency and who you're working with, you can anticipate, that administration may take, it may be a whole person who needs to come in and administer the grant, and move that process forward. And you can, and this is another good reason to work with grant writers, or at least to carefully read what happens within these RFPs. You can frequently budget for grant administration in your grant itself. That can be an activity that takes place within the scope of your work. So something to think about, it's something to be very aware of, is that these aren't just a cakewalk once you get them. They require accountability and transparency and reporting, and you're going to want to budget for that one way or another. One thing I'll mention, then this goes to a question that was asked, what kind of grant writing packages does Open Grants offer? And I'll just say, not only to startups, but to small businesses, large businesses, agencies, everyone, and how quickly can people get started. So one of the things we do offer at Open Grants is basically, grant management as a platform, as a service within our software. And so we do have integrations that back into a lot of the financial systems that are used, and we can manage the budgets and reporting on the behalf of the clients, and we can wrap that into a full service sort of end-to-end grant writing solution. And the reason we do that is just along the lines of what Tim was mentioning, is not only is it work upfront, there's work involved in getting the grant, and then once you get the grant, there's more work. And while the money is great and it's awesome to be able to execute on these projects, there's certainly a level of work that's involved. And I think that, some people forget that, or they're just so overjoyed about the money that they forget that they actually have to do the thing. But I always say, one of the worst things about getting new clients and new users is that you have to do stuff. Like if you didn't have to do anything, it'd be fine. And so, yeah. And we are actually working on some updates. So I apologize for any connectivity. You might try typing in opengrants.io all by itself, and see if that works for you. But I definitely will make a note over to our devs that's happening. So thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, that's, in a nutshell, the grant process, while often seen as this kind of enigma, is really a straightforward kind of exercise of aligning your values and the mission that you're on with that of a agency or funder, and then pulling together a narrative that dictates to them that, hey, we're going to use the money that you're giving us to pull off this thing that really supports what you're working on, and we are the best team to do that, and here's all the reasons why. And so as you're making those arguments, you want to consider not only your team and your technology and what you're working on and who you are, but you also want to consider who you're serving and what you're doing. There's a lot of extra points and extra traction you can gain by ensuring that you are doing things like building in equity and diversity and inclusive policies into your operations, that you're doing things to serve communities that maybe have been underlooked or underserved. So there's a lot of things to think through as you consider how to align yourself with an agency and then articulate that alignment in a way that will make them want to give you money. But you want to go much deeper than what's on the RFP and think through, how are these people actually thinking about their mission, and what, how do I look through their lens at the world and see how I fit into that space. So there's a couple other questions I'll just answer here. One is an RFP to solicit the help of a grant writer consultant. I don't know that I can help with that right out the gates, but maybe Tim or some of the other folks on the panel might be able to. I can certainly source one a bit later, but yeah, that's actually a great question, and I will I'll have to go back and dig up a few, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
This is Tim, and I was going to say, Gina at one point in her life was a grant writer, and I see that she's unmuted, so she might have been about ready to say what if she ever responded to an RFP for grant writer.
Actually, I was considering saying something, and thank you for that prompting. I largely dislike RFPs, which sounds ironic, but it's true. And I've always gotten all of my jobs through networking as a grant writer. Answering RFPs, I certainly don't mind. But finding a grant writer, it's really about asking someone that has had a successful grant application and ask them, who did you use? Now, if you're required to do some sort of competitive grant hiring process, then of course, let's find you a resource for a good RFP to solicit one.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely go through and look for some templates and see what we can dig up. And I do appreciate. I fully sympathize with the fact that many of you who work in a variety of potentially work at cities or other public organizations are probably required and under different restrictions in terms of how you hire and engage consultants. So yeah, we'll dig up something and email it out. But yeah, I do. I can certainly provide my contact information. If I don't do it right now, I'll certainly send it out in an email. And then happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or otherwise, and answer questions further. But yeah, I'll kind of turn the time over to the audience here. I'm happy to kind of maybe talk through a few other case studies, but I'd love to hear any other questions you have. If you're working on any specific projects and you have really specific questions about maybe different ways to engage agencies or to put together good partnerships. I think that above and beyond the things that we've talked about today, one of the things that I always bring up is, I try to encourage everyone to think a little more globally as they go after grants, and think about how to pull together other groups to collaborate on anything from purchase aggregation, which can drive some more power behind a grant, to how to partner with communities, or how to partner with the ED, the employment, what are they called? The employment board, where they're looking to train mechanics, or they might be looking to train technicians on vehicles. The more you can bring up the scope of your project and make it a little more global, instead of, hey, we're going to put this truck on the ground, the more competitive you can be, and you can also attract a lot larger awards and more dollars in the door. So
you mentioned, Sadale, that OpenGrants.io has a national list of grant opportunities, which makes me wonder, do you also do grant work outside California? And the reason I ask that is because clean cities coalitions frequently conspire or work together, and that means you might be doing a project that would span 2 or 3 states. Recently, there's the West Coast Corridor initiative that had California, Oregon, and Washington. There's an opportunity that we're just exploring now to do something that would be California, Nevada, Utah on Interstate 80, and that would be several different coalitions. So does Open Grants work on multi-state kinds of things? Do you just focus on California but happen to have a database of everything?
No, we span the nation, and we work on everything from, FEMA and economic development to vehicles to housing to, just across the board. We, a little bit of background on the company. We actually started with a focus on supporting nonprofits. We ended up developing a couple of different algorithms and decided to go really deep on early stage, deep technology companies, and really leaned into the federal government for about a year. We raised a bit of capital. So we're a venture-backed startup. We're about 2.5 years old, and backed by Boost VC, Adam Draper, and that team. And we're just, our vision here is to make this process much more transparent and palatable, so that, the goal in the future would be to have anybody, a fleet, a person, sign up, become instantly connected to the money that they need, and be able to transact on that grant opportunity in 30 days or so, and just be able to have basically like a direct deposit into your account. It goes, you get working on your project, and we're tracking impacts and moving that process forward using data, rather than this rather lengthy bureaucratic process. And so our vision and our mission is really to empower the really awesome bureaucrats and civil servants who are out there, to be able to do their jobs without having to fight through a bunch of bad paperwork and find that diamond in the rough. So
Hey, Sadale, this is an excellent lead in. Sorry for the interruption. One of our participants has asked, what is the cost range of your services to help them apply for a grant?
Yeah, great question. So what we do is we actually will connect you to an expert. So we work with a lot of wonderful companies, including Momentum, Grant Farm. We work with different teams across the United States, and we will let them scope the project. I'll say though, right now, just on the skew of companies that we serve and folks that we serve, the average contract size is about $25,000. The average award size is about 1.75 million. And those are averages. And so if I wanted to go deeper on kind of the fleet space, I unfortunately did not prepare that number. But one of the innovative things that we do as a company is we actually provide a lot of different financing opportunities. So we can finance projects over 1 year, 2 years, and we can put those onto annual contracts to work with governments and other folks. So we can offset those deeper upfront costs and free up budget for other kinds of activities along the way. So, yeah.
Maybe a slight addition to that would be, you talked about, well, let me back up and make the comment that frequently people say that the worst thing that can happen if you apply for a grant is to get it, because of the amount of work associated with actually doing the work. And, just kind of as a facetious comment. But you mentioned that that Open Grants actually will do grant administration, not just grant proposals. What kind of cost would be involved? I guess it's very hard to characterize, but what kind of cost would be involved in managing a grant after you get it?
Yeah, so the really neat thing about the grant management service we provide is that it is it's a software as a service. So think of it like TurboTax, but much more sophisticated for grant funding. So it's a subscription service. Right now, we've priced it out at about $395 a month. So it's something that we are testing and iterating on, certainly. But it's a subscription And it really enables the team to be able to confidently walk through compliance. It generates a full auditable trail of all the compliance docs you need. So, something that happens frequently is you'll get audited, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but when you get audited, you have to like provide all these records back, right? And it can be kind of a nightmare. And so what this platform does, one of the main features is compliance, right? So as you go through your grant contract, it'll actually force you to upload documents and store documents in an authoritative file that you can just hand back to an auditor and say, hey, here's everything you need to know about the project. Here's all the policies. Here's everything set up. Here's, direct rates, indirect rates. Here's the, RFQs that we went out and actually sourced our vendors the right way. Like, here's all the proof, and here it is in one simple thing. So we help funnel people through the process, and then we manage that process for them so they don't have to deal with it. It's definitely a really new revolutionary approach to it, and we're currently in kind of private beta with that, but that'll be out next year, and we'd love to, anyone who wants to reach out and test it out, we'd love to work with you, and we're happy to include you in our kind of wider beta, which will be running in Q1 and Q2 next year.
I don't know if you're looking at the question, but the $395 was $395 per month. That's what that is, right?
Yeah, and that's for the grant management software. And let's see, there's a couple other things in here. I saw, okay, Zev's comment around California Mobility Center. Super excited to see that rolling. You'll hear more about that in the future, but definitely do keep an eye on California Mobility Center. It's a really exciting initiative. We're very excited about what they're building, and we can talk more about that in the future. I don't know if I can say much more on that front. And does the $395 include all the monthly reporting? Yes. So basically, it automates those reports. Obviously, there's some human engagement needed to like actually send them and compile them and things. But yeah, it actually automates the reports. And yeah, I mean, there's support. It's really similar in kind of model wise to what you see with TurboTax, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm going through this whole thing, I'm clicking all the boxes, filing my taxes, and then if you have a question, you can like talk to an actual accountant, and they charge a little bit for that. But yeah, it includes those kind of support services, everything you need to just have your basically have your compliance and reporting taken care of for you. Yeah, so yeah, we're very excited about it, and so far we've gotten rave reviews from everyone. I'm not sure how many of you have actually managed grants before, but it it can be a bit of a thing. So yeah. Awesome. And I love, Gina's commentary here too. Audits are great. Just be prepared where you're working through grants to document accordingly. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have something that's doing that for you, and I'll just mention this is, if you're going after a grant, and if you are in the business of getting grants frequently, you should go through and organize. I just tell people to organize your house, right? And make sure that your bookkeeper and your accountant are fully briefed on exactly what needs to be accounted for and how, what needs to be stored where. A lot of this comes down to the money, right? That's the bottom line on a lot of these. And making sure that you just have all your ducks in a row. It's just massively helpful, not only for the health of your business, which I mean, that's one of grants are a good forcing function because they make you get organized and get compliant, get all the legal things you need in place, making sure you have everything from HR to confidentiality agreements and everything else all buttoned down in a way that's palatable to the state. So you definitely want to get all that stuff dialed in. And another question around, let me just read this here. Is there an example of total cost for grant support from beginning to end? There are examples. I mean, I'd say it, it really does vary depending on the size of the grant and everything else. But, on a $500,000 grant, we've seen anywhere from basically, the cost of a full-time person, right? So from 60 to 70K to manage do management for a grant of that size. Effectively you end up hiring a full-time person or a consultant who will come in and offer you 3 or 4 people to like round out the service there. And a question around, if I understand correctly, you direct customers to experts who are partners with Open Grants and they provide services for a fee that's separate from your fees. Yeah, 100%. So basically what Open Grants is a multi-sided marketplace where we have gone through the process of curating and interviewing and developing the talent that's on the platform. When a company signs up and creates a profile, they get connected to grants, and then they get connected to a grant writer who is curated for them. We curate the grants based on what you're trying to achieve in your profile, and then we also curate that grant writer based on their familiarity with the program that you've been matched with. And so it really ups that. If you say that on average, if you work with a good grant writer, you're 3 times more likely to be successful. If you work with a grant writer who knows the program that you're working on and who has had a lot of experience and is a senior person in that space, I mean, your chances of success and being competitive go way up. And that's what you get with Open Grants is we source from all of the best teams that we know. We interview, we vet all of these folks up front so that you don't have to worry about it. You know that you're getting very high quality premium talent. And we make money when they make money. Obviously, we take a cut in the marketplace. And then we also, we use the data off of the marketplace to provide SaaS services to government agencies and other folks. So that's how we make money.
So are you, just to clarify for the question, so you connect somebody with a perfect grant partner, you pay a fee. I would, if I'm inquiring, I would pay a fee to them, and then that's just one fee, and then they give you a cut of that. Is that what you're saying? Or is it a completely separate invoice?
Yeah, so let me be real clear about how this works. So basically, on a very basic level, you can sign up on our platform for, on Friday, we're launching a new version of our platform, which is why you might see some things that look a little funky right now on the website. But on Friday, the new model moving forward and for the future is that you'll be able to sign up on our platform for free. You can sign up, you can search through all the grants, you can get in deep and look at what each grant is. For about $9 a month, you can actually get matched to those grants instead of having to search. And then that is a separate cost. But so those are those costs to just get in the platform. And then beyond that, we do connect you to a grant writer, and we curate that grant writer for you. And we also connect you to the grant, of course. And then you have fees that you would owe the grant writer for their work. And so that's a separate relationship that you would work out between you and the grant writer. And it just is facilitated on our platform, very similar to Upwork or Freelancer or any of the other big kind of marketplace platforms that are out there. And so you don't actually, you'll see it reflected in the cost of the project just because we're transparent and upfront. But it's, you pay the grant writer gets paid, we get paid, and everyone goes their merry way, and everyone's happy, hopefully. So hopefully that answered the question. I hope it was clear. Awesome.
Well, it looks like maybe we've reached time. We're right at time. And I think maybe we've answered all the questions. So I think what I would do at this point is thank you very much, Sadale. And then I'm going to jump in with just some concluding items here. As I said at the beginning when we started, we want to thank Sadale very much for his presentation today. And the presentation will be on the Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition website the link to it will be there. The presentation itself, the video will be on our YouTube channel. And I just wanted to briefly go over the fact that we will be doing several additional presentations. We have on the 17th of November, we are partnering on a presentation that's going to the Plug-in Electric Vehicle Collaborative on on maintenance of an electric vehicle and buying a used electric vehicle. On December 9th, we'll have a webinar on heavy-duty battery electric vehicles, basically do's and don'ts of what to do with the heavy-duty vehicle drivetrain and vehicle charging and charge management. On the 15th of December, we will be doing a presentation on the Endurance electric pickup truck. And then starting next year, we're going to be doing some additional ones. Sometime in January, we'll be doing one on battery electric refuse trucks, and more to come as we keep moving through the year. And with that, I think I would say thanks to everybody for joining us. And Sadale, I see you're muted yourself, but if you're all done, then we'll sign off. And if you want to say anything more, you can sort of wrap up, or you got anything else you want to bring up?
I don't think I have anything else I want to bring up, just to say thanks everyone for your time. I'm happy to be a resource. You saw probably the best way to get in touch with me is to shoot me an email first. So you saw my email there. Happy to answer any other questions and be a resource. That's what we're here for. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. So yeah, I look forward to, helping support all the cool things that y'all are doing. And definitely don't hesitate to reach out and connect. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you much, Sadale. Everybody for we'll conclude the presentation for today.